Now available in paperback and Kindle, vampires stalk the darkness of the Eternal Night. Get your copy of Eternal Night in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com.
Over the weekend, there was an incident at the True Kitchen restaurant in Texas where several black women were dancing and twerking on top of tables inside of this fine dining establishment. And when the owner, a black man, decided to admonish these women and tell them that their behavior was out of line, we had many in the media trying to castigate this man for standing up for himself and standing up for his business. Now, this owner several times had admonished these women to not act out like this before he decided to go out and start yelling and addressing the crowd in a video that went viral. And when I take a critical examination of that incident inside of the True Kitchen in Texas, it shows me how a generation of black females really have not received any sort of home training. Because back in the days when I was being raised by my mother and my father, the first thing we were taught when we were at home was how to conduct ourselves when we went outside. And I remember back in the 80s when my mother and my father would take me to McDonald's. And when we went to that McDonald's, we were expected to be on our best behavior inside of that fast food restaurant. Now, back in the day, for a kid, McDonald's was a major treat, and you had to have yourself carrying yourself in a respectful fashion in order to get that McDonald's when you were on that trip with your mother or your father. And back then, again, you had to show respect for your parents in order to receive that fast food. And the reason why my parents raised me like that was because they understood that my behavior was a reflection of how they raised me. And they also were teaching me that when you're outside, there's a way you carry and conduct yourself in public, because when you go out here and you're acting a fool, it reflects badly on you, and it also reflects badly on the family who raised you. And when kids would act out back then and do things like go and stand up in the chairs or even try to get up on the tables, what would happen was the parents would go out here and grab that kid, take them in the bathroom, and they would get chopped up with whatever belt or shoe that parent had. And then after that, those kids would learn that this is not the way we act in public. And when you're outside, you do not go out here throwing fits and acting crazy, because you understand that this is embarrassing behavior. And if you act in an embarrassing fashion that makes the family look bad, then what's going to happen is you're going to deal with the consequences of a punishment from the family. Unfortunately, over the last 30 to 35 years, many of these single mother households that have emerged have these black women in charge, and these black women who were put in charge, they really did not think about things as related to how their behavior and conduct reflected on the outside. And because they didn't think about how their behavior and conduct reflected on themselves on the outside, they would believe that they could act in any sort of fashion and behave in any sort of way, and there was no real consequences for it, because we oftentimes had enablers in law enforcement that when people decided to try to check their behavior, they would call 911 on those people who would try to call out their embarrassing behavior. And because of this conditioning over the last 35 years, what has happened is we've got two generations, I believe, of black women who believe that they can just act in any way that they want. And over the last 10 to 20 years, they've been acting crazy inside of these fast food restaurants and having these fights in the fast food restaurants and participating in all sorts of reckless and crazy behaviors in the fast food restaurant. And now we have these women who have graduated from the fast food restaurant to the fine dining restaurant, and now they want to bring their crazy behavior into the fine dining establishments. And this black business owner, he wasn't going to have that in his establishment, True Kitchen, because he understood that when people enter a fine dining establishment, they are coming for an experience. And part of that experience is being able to sit inside of a restaurant and be able to enjoy the atmosphere of the restaurant and the food of the restaurant without being distracted by any of the other patrons inside of that establishment. That is what people pay for when they go out here to be a part of a fine dining experience. And the people who, black women who went to this restaurant, they went there because they wanted to just be able to floss and show out, but they didn't understand that there are unwritten social rules as related to a fine dining establishment. Now, some people are out here saying that this black owner was in the wrong, but I don't believe that this owner was in the wrong. This owner had every right to protect his business, and he had every right to protect the reputation of his business and his brand, because this man was creating a fine dining establishment with a fine dining experience, and that fine dining establishment and that fine dining experience was about the food. And if these women wanted to go and dance somewhere, there was a bar or a club they could have gone to go out here and dance. The fact that these women had no self-control and acted on impulse showed how immature they were, and the fact that they were inside of this restaurant dancing and twerking sadly showed me that they had absolutely no home training whatsoever. It wasn't about the owner having a DJ inside of his restaurant, because many fine dining establishments have stereos where music is played, and that music is played to enhance the dining experience. And most people, when they're sitting in the restaurant and they're listening to the music in the background, they are just waiting for their food because they're coming there for the food. But these women, they decided to act on their impulses like a child and decided that, oh, a song I like is playing, so I'm going to act on my impulses and then get up on this table like a child and then start twerking and dancing on top of this table. This is juvenile behavior, and everyone should be calling these women out for being so immature, irresponsible, and reckless, and embarrassing not only themselves but also the black race by participating in such embarrassing behavior. But the mainstream, instead, because they want to castigate and attack the black man, they want to make him the bad guy when he was not the bad guy. He was a man who was acting like a man and letting these women know what the boundaries were for his business. It's no different than what I had to do when I was working at the science library at City College one day, and some people came in and started talking loud. And I had to come behind the counter and let those people know they were in a library and they needed to be quiet and respectful of the other students. And it seems like in many cases, whenever a black man decides to assert authority, people want to make him into a bad guy, but he's not a bad guy. He is merely setting a boundary for his business, and that's what the man in True Kitchen was doing, was setting a boundary for how people would behave inside of his business and how they would carry and conduct themselves inside of his business. that is his right as a business owner to demand that people carry and conduct themselves in a certain way while they are at his establishment, because as a fine dining establishment, you are supposed to be coming there on your best behavior. Now, I have to wonder if Gordon Ramsay had to deal with these types of females and he went off in a profanity laced tirade, would these same media outlets and these same black women be as upset at him as they are at this black man? And I doubt they'd be upset at Gordon Ramsay. In fact, I think more people would be supportive of Gordon Ramsay because Gordon Ramsay is a man who demands high standards inside of his restaurants, and he demands high standards from his staff, and he also demands high standards from his patrons. So people have to show Gordon Ramsay respect, but these black females thought, oh, I don't need to show this black man his respect. I don't have to show this black man respect for his business. I don't have to show this black man respect for his other patrons. And I don't have to show myself respect to everyone because I'm thinking that I can act crazy inside of this fast food restaurant and act in an extremely immature fashion like a child who had never been taught how to carry and conduct themselves with and has absolutely no home training. Because a child who has home training, they know when they enter into an establishment, they need to be on their best behavior, and they know they need to be acting in a way that reflects positively on themselves, positively on their families. And if they're black, they know that they have to do this because their behavior reflects on the race. Because those same people who made those videos attacking that black man are also making videos about these black women who were dancing and twerking in that restaurant and using that to breathe brand new life into old stereotypes about black women being lustful and out of control. And they're back here laughing at these black women and saying how out of control they were, and they don't understand how badly their behavior reflects on the race. And the main reason why they don't understand why their behavior reflects badly on the race is because we have two generations of black girls who never grew up in a structured home with a father and never grew up with a man and a woman to teach them a model for how you carry and conduct yourselves, and the reason why you always watch how you carry and conduct yourself in public, because when you act a fool in public, it's a bad reflection on you, it's a bad reflection on your family, it's a bad reflection on the race, and it makes everybody start to think that your black person is nothing more than somebody who has no self-control, no discipline, and it cannot carry or conduct themselves inside of a social situation, and that's somebody they don't really want around because this is the type of person who is an embarrassment wherever they go. And all of those people who are out here trying to attack this owner, they don't really understand that he was in his rights to check this behavior because, again, as a business owner, it's his right to protect his property and set boundaries for how people carry and conduct themselves inside of his establishment. Now, many of these women over the last 10, 20 years, they have been getting away with acting a fool inside of these fast food restaurants, having these fights in these McDonald's, having fights in the White Castle, having fights in the Burger King, having fights at the Popeyes, and they think that this behavior is acceptable inside of a fine dining establishment. Well, I have to say, I'm glad that this owner drew a line in the sand, and while many of these people out here may be testy about that line, that line needs to be there because in fine dining, you're not going to act a fool in a fine dining establishment because those owners have a reputation to protect. And another thing I really want to think about that I had learned from Mad Black 80 on Facebook, he had said that these black women would act crazy inside of this black owned fast food restaurant, but when the Asian man beats them up or Hassan beats them up inside of the 7-Eleven or the nail salon, these people come back. I mean, these same women talking about they want to boycott this guy, but when Hassan at the gas station is beating them up or Mr. Ling is slapping them around at the weave shop, they want to come back and not understanding this man needs our support because this man is setting a standard for black manhood. He is setting a standard for his business, and like Gordon Ramsay, setting a standard for how things are supposed to be. And he's setting that boundary because without those standards, you will have your restaurant experience ruined for lots of people, and those black people won't have a nice fine dining establishment to go to. And you hear oftentimes we'll hear black people say, "Oh, we don't have any fast food restaurants. I'm not fast food, fine dining restaurants." And it's people like these twerkers who make it where nobody wants to come to that restaurant because they see these people acting a fool in the restaurant, acting crazy in the restaurant, and it makes it where people get discouraged from coming to a fine dining establishment, and that makes those owners go out of business. And this man understood that when you have people like this acting a fool in your business, it reflects badly on your business and it costs you customers because they see that the owners aren't getting people in line and that there's a certain type of clientele that are coming to this restaurant. So it's not really a fine dining experience. It's what many people would call a ghetto experience. And this man didn't want that at his business. I mean, yes, he had a DJ playing music, but they oftentimes have music playing in these fine dining establishments in the background. They'll have like this tape classical music, and nobody wants to get up and dance and twerk on the tables there in a fine dining establishment like a Gordon Ramsay's Rest Steak or someplace like that. They don't want to go and do that, and that's because those people understand fine dining is an experience, and they respect the experience. They respect the owner. They respect them all because they want to enjoy the food. And this is something that flies over the heads of those twerkers and people who want to defend them, is they don't understand that there has to be a standard for behavior when you go out to places like fine dining. You just can't act a fool. And usually most people learn these rules in places like McDonald's and Burger King's and Popeyes because that was considered a treat. Unfortunately, over the last 35 years, we've had so many people learning that acting a fool inside of a fast food restaurant is something that you do, and now they want to take it over to fine dining, and that cannot be allowed. And I thank this owner for standing up for himself, standing up as a black man, and standing up and showing us a true picture of black manhood and black masculinity, and showing us how a black man is supposed to assert male authority. Because if you don't set a line in the sand as related to your business, then people will disrespect your business and they will go out here and be able to do whatever they please in your business. And what would have happened if one of these women dancing and twerking on the table had fallen off? There's a critical question I want to ask, because if one of these women who was dancing and twerking on top of the table had fallen off that table, she would want to sue that owner. But as I see it, that's why he had to draw a line in the sand, because he was going to be liable if something happened and he didn't check her. And that's just unsanitary when you really want to think about it. Because I was watching a Ringo live stream, he was talking about it, and he's like, it's really unsanitary because people have to eat on top of those tables, and nobody knows what's on the bottom of your shoes or what's under these women's dresses. I mean, nobody knows what's there, and nobody wants to deal with any of that when they're inside of a fine dining establishment. Because when you're inside of a fine dining establishment, usually all you want to do is put on your best clothes, go to this restaurant, be seated, and try and experience the food. But these people, they just have a really messed up mindset, and they wanted to act in an embarrassing fashion. And they went out here and not only again embarrassed themselves, but they also embarrassed the black race, because this is the way white supremacists believe black people act whenever they're in a fast food restaurant. And this is why they don't want us coming to their fine dining establishments, because they fear you're going to act like this. And all those people who want to attack this black man, they don't understand that you're just going out here supporting white supremacy, and you're supporting white supremacist ideas about black people, because it's not the man who was in the wrong, it was the women who were in the wrong. And what's sad is nobody sees how they were behaving like small children, and they were in this restaurant acting in a way that 35 years ago, when I was a kid, if you acted like this, what would have happened was you would have been taken inside of a bathroom, and you would have gotten your behind chopped up with a belt or a shoe. And that would have taught you not to act like this, because you were acting in a way that was embarrassing your family, embarrassing yourself, and embarrassing your race. And you would be told this after you were spanked. And sadly, because there was nobody there to spank this 2 to 3 generations of black women and teach them the discipline they needed to know about how to carry and conduct themselves in public, they participated in this spectacle and thought that this was perfectly fine behavior. And what's really crazy is we want to attack the black man for trying to set some order as related to this situation, but we don't need to attack this black man. We need to applaud him for being a business owner who set boundaries, being a man who reinforced standards and established standards for his business, and established standards for how people will conduct himself inside of his business. This man was doing what a man was supposed to do. He was showing leadership skills, and he was showing that he was not going to let people take his place and turn it into chaos, because he wanted to have a set order as related to how people carry and conduct themselves inside of his establishment. And we need more black men like this, because black men like this are the foundation for building a strong black community, building a strong black family, and creating a community where people know what the social rules are and how to conduct themselves inside of those social rules. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to learn more about why women go out here and dance and twerk on top of tables like this, you can pick up my book, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available for the first time in paperback, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. Learn all the reasons why so many black women can't find a husband and why 70% of black women are single. Get your copy of Why 70% of Black Women Are Single on Amazon.com today.